A common question among outdoor recreation professionals is what standard of care do they need to provide their guests? The Patel Fatality on the Colorado River illustrates this question. A higher standard of care helps to avoid the accident, which helps to avoid the lawsuit. In tort law, the standard of care is the degree of caution that a reasonable person should exercise in a given situation so as to avoid causing injury. In the early days of the outdoor movement in the 1970s, Betty Vandersmissen, a lawyer and expert, noted that outdoor professionals are really reasonable professionals, which is a higher standard of care. Why the need for a higher standard of care? The backcountry is very different from the front country. Guests are unfamiliar with this new environment. In her statement, one expert for the defense in the Patel case discussed what she referred to as trickle-in education. She wrote that the importance and relevance of this dialogue is to show that safety information is continually being shared by the guides. It trickles in as the trip goes on, and education is a continual process, as there is so much information for participants new to this environment to become familiar with. At the beginning of the trip, guests need to learn pretty much everything. Initially, they need a higher standard of care. There are specific hand-washing procedures, filling water bottles, and eating procedures. In addition, they learn leave-no-trace practices. In the tug-of-war to transfer the responsibility of any injury, damage, or loss to the guests, they received the following trip eligibility requirement. They are supposed to perform skills such as demonstrating the ability to get out from under an overturned boat, or swim in the current and float on your back. Other than requesting guests to perform unsafe acts, think about where they are going to safely complete these skills. The irony of this requirement is that it accurately describes what guests might experience on their raft trip. However, until they swim in the swift-moving Colorado River with its large standing waves, they have no real appreciation of the dangers present. For this reason, they need a higher standard of care from the guides who appreciate the dangers of rapids and the swift-moving current of the Colorado River. The guides knew they needed to provide a higher standard of care. In his interview with the National Park Service investigators, one guide along with several other guides warned guests to stay in the eddy, and then they went on with their business, leaving the guests unsupervised.
Some of the kids are even hanging out behind that rock in that eddy because it's a little deeper. And one of these guys showed up right when he got here and dove in head first in front of that rock. And I shouted at him immediately because I was on my boat on the end right there. It's like, hey man, this is strong current. There's a rapid downstream. This is serious.
The guests in the eddy above the rapids were an accident waiting to happen. Sitting on the rock unsupervised, Sheetal reached for the water bottle she dropped in the water. The current caught her and swept her 1/2 to 3/4 miles downstream before rescuers finally caught up with her lifeless body. Hence the accident, and hence the lawsuit. The company and guides needed to provide a higher standard of care regarding on-site supervision of the swimmers and waders. Yet why didn't they provide the necessary supervision? The simple answer is that the 8 guides were busy getting the trip ready to get underway. They didn't have the personnel or the time to provide direct supervision. However, the lack of supervision goes deeper. Knowing that the National Park Service regulation prohibiting swimming and bathing in locations immediately above rapids, eddies, and riffles or near rough water, the company and its guides clearly ignored the regulation. The guides didn't consider it a problem. Decker notes that at some point policies can become inefficient because they hinder completing the work, in this case, getting ready for the trip. Perhaps in the minds of the guides, the need to cool off guests from the 116-degree heat superseded the National Park Service regulation. Perhaps none of the guests were ever swept away in the current, so why should it happen now? Perhaps the guides believed that they acted safely and that accidents happened to others. The trip leader's interview with the National Park Service investigators clearly infers that violating the National Park Service regulation wasn't a concern. He had a medical emergency and possible evacuation to take care of, as well as getting the trip underway.
Yeah, understood.
So when we get her down here, we were still dealing with the heat-related issue. Right?
Yeah.
And so we had the umbrella there, and we're all focused on it right then. So I happened to be over there at the boat, but when we're doing this, we weren't paying attention that people were standing around here in the current. So the swimmer was standing here in the current. Next thing they're going, hey, she's on the rock. And so she still got a life jacket, and so we're scrambling for a throw bag, and then 3 guides get in the boat, and I immediately ran to call the chopper.
The guides needed to offer a higher standard of care, yet they didn't. In the video on supervision, barrier analysis suggested wearing life jackets during the cooling off activity or moving the activity upstream. Both would have helped to reduce the likelihood of being swept away in the current. The problem is that the guides believed that they were acting safely, and for whatever reason, the National Park Service policy didn't apply to them. Barrier analysis is an important tool. However, it needs to be coupled with a safety culture within the organization where guides continually examine the situation, looking for possible injury, damage, or loss. It is continually playing the what-if game, looking for potential incidents and preventing the accident before it happens. This is part of providing a higher standard of care and being a reasonable professional. Unfortunately, this aspect of a safety culture was missing. It resulted in a fatality and lawsuit.